Welcome to the Inner Space Project Podcast, where we explore the full spectrum of emotions, from joy and love to sadness and fear, taking you on an inner space journey that challenges societal norms, encourages open dialogue, and raises awareness about all the parts of us, including the ones that may seem dark and mysterious. I'm your host, Dr. Patti Ashley, psychotherapist, author, TEDx speaker, and clinical trainer. Thank you for joining me as we navigate the labyrinth of emotions, dismantle stigma, and pave the way for a more compassionate and connected world. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 5th episode of the Inner Space Project Podcast. I'm Dr. Patti Ashley here, and I have a special guest today, my CU intern, Isabella Cole. Hi, Isabella. She's been working behind the scenes on this podcast and my social media. You've probably seen my amazing IG post going out there. That's all thanks to her.
I have so much fun doing it.
Yay.
Awesome.
Oh, God, you're the best. And so I thought we would talk a little bit today about liminal space, because the podcast is set up to have beginnings, middles, and endings. Beginning of life interviews, people that work with people 0 to 18, middles being just life in general, relationships and stuff, and endings being grief, loss, transition. But as I was working on this podcast, I realized that there's this important piece that happens in between things in our lives. It's called liminal space. Mm-hmm. And so liminal space is actually from the Latin word limen or limen, which means threshold. Liminal space is the time between what was and next, a place of transition, a time of waiting and not knowing the future. And Richard Rohr describes this as a place where we are betwixt and between the familiar and the completely unknown. There alone is our old world left behind while we are not sure of the new existence. That's a good space where genuine newness can begin. So I thought, boy, what a cool thing to really speak to, because I don't think we like to talk about that, because the problem is liminal space typically doesn't feel good. No one really likes to be in the unknown. Let's face it, we're all control freaks to some degree, right? I mean, we like to control our lives, but the ultimate reality is we can't control anything. All of the ebb and flow in our life, there's always going to be these in-between liminal spaces. So I really wanted to give that some space, no pun intended, to talk about. Yeah. And so what we're going to do today is talk about the guests that we've already had, the guests that are coming up, and then talk about our own liminal space that we're both in at this time. Yeah. And so real quick, hopefully you've watched the podcast. If not, I highly recommend you go back and see these episodes. Deanne Davies, who's an infant mental health specialist, is a good friend of mine. She's worked in the field forever. She's done amazing things. And she talks to parents about, lightening up pretty much on themselves and the whole experience of being a new parent.
Yeah.
To say about that.
I definitely loved her episode a lot, and just her whole conversation about intuition and not necessarily having to follow the methods and theories out there about parenting, because there's always something new coming up. And she just really opened my eyes a little bit.
And you put a really sweet clip on Instagram too of something that she said, and of course I can't remember what it is, but I would highly recommend you go to my Instagram page and see that, because she did a little short reel about something Deanne said that was so profound.
Just a lot of profound things.
Kind of like an exhale, right? Like, we don't have to be so hard on ourselves. And then Christy Sears Thompson is my middles guest, and she talks about relationship, and I really pulled her in to talk about attachment, because that's been a big topic for people these days. You see a lot on anxious attachment and avoidant attachment, the runners and the chasers. And we can relate to that. And so it's great. And she has this whole method that she's come up with. It's called partnerhood. And then Ted Wired, who is a remarkable man in Taos, New Mexico, who started a grief retreat center. And he's had a lot of loss in his life. I'll let you watch the episode to see. And Isabella's also put, I think, clips on all of these on Instagram. If you want to see a little short reel to get a little preview of what you're going to see in the full-on podcast. But
that was definitely my favorite episode. partially because it was the first one I fully edited and produced and worked on, but also just because of his story and everything he talked about with grief and loss and what the retreat center does. And I think my favorite thing that he said was how grief goes deeper than language. It just sort of, it brings language to something that doesn't have language.
Yeah. Yeah. And just even taking that in, hearing you say it, it's so important because so much of what we talk about with emotions and mental health doesn't have language. And we're trying to put language to something that is really nonverbal. It's our feeling, it's an essence, it's visceral. So I love that you remembered that from Ted's conversation. And he's a remarkable man. He's been through a lot in his life, and he really shows up for people in grief. And then upcoming, we're trying to run these every 3 weeks. So 3 weeks from today should have Zena Beringen, who is a retired CSU professor and has created a model of what she calls an emotional availability scale, which is used all over the world to look at how people are available in relationships. And so that'll be an interesting thing to watch. And then Laura Deal, who's a good friend of mine, she's a storyteller, and stories are so healing because they activate the right brain, and we use metaphor and archetypes instead of just that. Again, similar to what you were saying about Ted, it's nonverbal and you're putting language to something, but you also have a feeling essence when you use metaphor. So when you tell a story, and we're wired for story, it really does rewire the brain and calm the nervous system. So that's a great interview. You don't want to miss that. And then my endings interview coming up is Karen Van Allen, who is a good friend of mine as well. And she lost her daughter in childbirth 24 years ago on July 4th. And I did the interview, recorded the interview with her kind of close to that time frame. So it was quite raw. And she shares her experience of that with you. And she's been studying the Course in Miracles since it happened 20 some years ago. And so she's writing a book on how the Course in Miracles has really informed her experience of walking through grief. So that's what you got coming up. I really hope you can listen to the podcast, share it with your friends, subscribe. It's something very near and dear to my heart that I've been wanting to do for a long time. And I'm really grateful to have Isabella here helping me. And we're going to hopefully get some more people on board too, and get this up and running even bigger and better going forward. But we're both kind of in liminal space right now. I just moved back to Niwot. Yay. Got my office in Niwot, and I've got a temporary place to live. So the thing about liminal space, like we were saying earlier, is it's not easy sometimes to be in it because it's the unknown, it's the mystery. And I think a long time ago, I learned that one of the biggest spiritual lessons we have is how to be in the unknown. And so I'm opened up this beautiful office in Niwot that I have a 3-year lease on. So that's kind of not so liminal because that finally happened, but there was a couple months of remodeling and not uncertainty. And in the meantime, I'm also renting a temporary place to live so I can be close to the office in Niwot. And so I really like home and my home. And so I'm living in liminal space right now. And it's somehow teaching me a lot. As much as it's uncomfortable at times, I'm really noticing that I'm learning more about myself and how to be in that space. So, and you're a college student, so you got a lot of liminal space going on
totally
as well.
So I should have graduated in May. I walked with all my friends, but I won't be officially graduated until December. So I'm definitely in a liminal space that I didn't expect to be in because I just, anticipated to fully be graduated and really in the thick of the liminal space. I have a little bit of, I know what my fall looks like in my winter, but it still is very weird. And all of my friends are in liminal space right now, figuring out where they're going to live and what they're going to do for work. And those things are obviously on my mind too. It's just a crazy, confusing time. The unknown is definitely, or has been, challenging. And I think that I'm trying to be very intentional about approaching this time with like grace for myself and for other people, and trying to make it less of a stressful thing and more of just embracing that, it's kind of freeing in a way because you really don't know what's going on. So it's kind of like appreciating the small moments and all of that. And I also like, for whatever reason, I like to not know what's next fully and having the mystery of the future. So trying to be positive about all of it.
Yeah.
It's hard some days.
Yeah.
But-
Well, I think that's so good. I always use the analogy of Christmas. I don't really like Christmas, so I want to make sure I clarify that. Christmas is not my favorite holiday because it stirs up so many emotions for people. But the idea of Christmas presents under a tree, and you got a present somewhere, and you see your present there, but you can't open it. You have to wait. And I kind of think when I'm in liminal space, that helps me kind of get through. Like there's something waiting for me. It's a gift, and I can't open it yet.
Yeah.
And I have to be in the not knowing. That helps me get through, because again, it would be nice if we can control our life. I have a ton of clients who are, the way they feel emotionally safe in the world is by controlling and planning. And, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do? What's my schedule? How am I going to do? And I got to know I know what's next. And sometimes we can't, especially when things like COVID happened, or even the fires in Louisville, or 9/11 back in the day. It's like things that happen that I heard somebody say once that, we buy insurance for all these things, but the one thing that we don't have insurance for is what happens, so it's like learning how to be where we are in the not knowing. It's a big learning space.
Yeah, it's definitely uncomfortable, but it can be fun. I don't know if that's the word, but
we can make it fun.
Yeah. Interesting for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here we are in liminal space, and stay tuned for the upcoming episodes, and we'll keep you posted with the ones that come afterwards. We'll try and run about every 3 weeks, like we said. And is there anything else you want to speak to about the episodes or liminal space or podcast?
I don't think so. Thank you so much for having me on. Hopefully we can do it again in the future, and we'll have some great updates.
Yeah, I like it until you move, after graduation. We'll definitely have you back to do this again. It's really fun. Thanks. All right. Well, subscribe, share with your friends, and stay tuned for the next episodes. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this inner space journey, and we'll come back again for the upcoming episodes. For more information about the Inner Space Project and all the other offerings I have for you, please visit my website, www.pattiashley.com, PATTIASHLEY. Thanks again, and I'll see you real soon.